accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 145 of the podcast of OA. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and as usual, we're joined by our good buddy, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you doing?
Hello, all. I'm doing great, man. Everything's good. I'm back to work now after my summer break, and, looking forward to the new school year. Got a bunch of new freshmen coming in, a bunch of new attitudes to deal with, and it's going to be a good time in high school.
So in my world, today is, we're recording this on August 8th, and today is the day that my wife and I are celebrating our 32nd anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, man. I did not know that. That's really good. I'm really, really happy for you both.
Thank you. Marriage is a journey, and I love my wife dearly, and one of the things I've got to do is thank her for letting me do this as a hobby, because I do spend money on all this stuff, and she lets me do it willingly, and I think she likes it because it keeps me off the streets at night.
It's anything they can do to keep us at home so we're not out making trouble.
She and I are we're going to Connecticut. This weekend is Terrificon in Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun Casino, and so my anniversary gift to myself was tickets to the show.
That's gonna be a good time.
So she's going to go with me, and usually when I go to these shows, my son goes with me, but she's going to go with me, and I'm going to try to film some interviews for the YouTube channel, and I'll grab the audio off of that, and we'll throw it into the podcast in a future episode. But some of the people that are going to be there, Liam Sharp, artist for the Green Lantern, is going to be there, and he's already agreed to give me an interview, so I'm really, really looking forward to that one. Neil Adams is going to be there. I'm going to try to talk to him, but he... I don't mean to talk badly of anybody, but he almost wants me to pay him to talk to him. So that kind of is his approach to certain things, but maybe he'll let me. Tom King is going to be there. I know Tom King has become kind of a very divisive figure of late, but he did that really, really good Hal Jordan story during the Darkseid War. And I interviewed him before that book came out when he was writing Omega Men. So I'm hoping to talk to him again and talk to him a little bit about maybe is he got any Green Lantern in his future, because he has said that Hal Jordan is his favorite character to write in the DC universe. It's his most fun.
He's going to be doing Adam Strange, I think, coming up.
Yeah. But I'm thinking, Morrison's got another year in the book, so maybe
right.
Would we get Tom King down the road? I don't know. Another person who's going to be there, and I didn't realize it until I was looking over the guest list today and pulling some books out to sign them. Besides someone like Joe Staton, is a guy by the name of Joe Giella, or Giella. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, and he is the last surviving Batman artist of the Silver Age.
Interesting. Wow, that'd be a really, really noteworthy meetup.
Well, the interesting thing about this individual was he was the inker on Showcase 22, 23, and 24.
Wow.
He also did the covers to some of the early Green Lantern issues and did inks for Gil Kane.
That's really, really cool. I mean, that's an icon right there.
Yeah. I found a book I have in my collection that Giella and Joe Staton both worked on, and they're both going to be there, so I thought I'd get them both to sign the same book. Yeah,
that'd be really cool. That'd be good for the collection, man. Big time score there.
But there's a whole bunch of people that are going to be there. Keith Champagne. I can't remember all of the names. There's a whole bunch of them. So I've got kind of a laundry list. I'm going to try to do some interviews with as many of them that will let me. I found out about the show too late to get a press pass, so I'm just going with a regular pass. But I'm hoping that if I portray myself professionally enough, that they'll let me do interviews. I'm going to be wearing I have a Green Lantern baseball jersey that came out years ago. So if I can get this episode out this evening, because I'm leaving first thing in the morning, if I can get this episode out this evening and people out there are listening to the show, if you're going to Terrificon on Saturday and you see a guy walking around in a Green Lantern baseball jersey, it's me. Please come up to me and say hello, because I'd love to meet folks. I don't think I've yet been to a show where I've met somebody who listens to this podcast or reads the blog. So I'd love to run into some folks.
it's really cool that you get to see all these players and stuff in the comic book industry. It's like St. Louis, we have our Comic-Con, and they just sometimes they don't get a lot of big name players. I mean, the big one this year was Jason Momoa, but I mean, outside of that, we usually nothing against him, but we usually get characters like Henry Winkler and
hey.
I love the fonts too, but it's like I used to like going and I used to follow Tyler Kirkham around, and he hasn't been to St. Louis in a while, and he's one of my favorite artists of all time. And I loved going and seeing him, and I've only got to see him one time in my entire, and going to any cons that I've ever been to, because he's never at the ones that I go to anyway. And that's really cool. That's really cool. You get to meet some of these guys. So
it's interesting. Now I kind of live in an interesting area. I live about a half an hour away from Ithaca, New York, which is where Cornell University is. And there for a while, like in the 70s, a lot of comic book creators lived in the Ithaca area, and Roger Stern still lives there, as well as a couple of other creators. But back in the day, it was quite an area, and there's a convention they have in Ithaca called Ithacon. And I remember in its heyday, we used to get Jim Shooter and a lot of these really big names, and it's kind of not that way anymore. Ithacon still happens. It's one of the longest running cons in the country, but they don't really draw the names anymore. So for me nowadays, I have to travel about 5 hours or so to get to a big show. Connecticut, that's about a 5-hour drive. Sometimes they have shows. I mean, New York City's about a 5-hour drive for me. Baltimore is a little bit longer. And that's a really good show, the Baltimore Comic-Con. So I've got to go a considerable distance, so I don't get to go often. But when I do, I always try to target shows that have people that I really want to get signatures from, or those kind of things.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I hope you have a good time, and I hope everything goes well.
I hope so. I think it'll be a good show. It's been a couple of years since I went. I think the last big show I went to was Baltimore Comic-Con, and that was in 2016 or 2017. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be a good time.
Make sure when you talk to Liam, let him know that Phil Bova says hi, and I love and appreciate all the work he is doing in the comic book industry.
Well, I'm also I'm going to approach Mr. Sharp about something I'd like to partner with him on, and I don't want to say too much about it yet. But if he will do what I'm hoping, what I'm going to ask him to do, we'll have something really cool coming up. So cool. That's my teaser for the episode.
That's right. That's going to attract new listeners, because they're going to be like, ooh, what's he talking about? I'm going to have to listen to future episodes now.
So we've had a busy couple of weeks in terms of comics. So we've got a Grant Morrison annual, a Green Lantern annual, that doesn't have Liam Sharp in it, but it does have a different artist in it. And we had Green Lantern number 10, which just came out yesterday. And also what came out yesterday was a Sinestro one-shot Year of the Villain tie-in book. So we've got 3 books to talk about. It's been a while since we've had this many books in one episode.
I know it has. And I'm really excited about the Sinestro one-shot, because I like Mark Russell, and he's the one who does one of my favorites, the Wonder Twins. And I actually messaged him on Twitter today after I read it. And I'm looking forward to talking about it. It's going to be cool, because we haven't seen Sinestro around in a while. I mean, he's been in Justice League, but he's been kind of a back character. He hasn't really had his own he hasn't stood out much, but this one he stood out, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. So let's take a quick pause. We'll come back in a few minutes, and let's start with the Green Lantern annual.
Awesome.
Hey guys, come check out Two Dimension Comics, the comic book podcast with no direction.
We feature candid roundtable discussions about all things comics, past and present, with a killer soundtrack.
We like to include visuals of everything we talk about on the show. You can find that by going to bunchofdorks.com and click on the Cyclops!
Hey everybody, welcome back, and here we are with the first Green Lantern annual in the times of Grant Morrison. What an issue, I'll say that. 42 pages of glory. Although this time we're minus Liam Sharp. We got this guy by the name of Giuseppe Camuncoli. I'm not familiar with his work. I don't know if you remember him from anything else, or is he a up-and-coming artist, or?
I'm not really familiar with his work, and I did a little digging. I couldn't find anything that I've read that he's drawn.
Okay, so I got a side note question towards him. On the page in here, it says Giuseppe Camuncoli, and it says layouts. Now, I'm kind of curious what the difference between layouts and what the difference between artists would be, just from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah, well, I think the layouts, like you'll notice that like Trevor Scott is listed as finishes.
Sure.
So I think he kind of roughs the images and does the page layout and design. He kind of roughs in the images, and then the person that's listed as the finisher is the person who comes in and actually finishes the pencil work off.
Gotcha. Okay, I needed clarification. I kind of figured that's what it was, but I was like, that's kind of I haven't seen that used in a while, that layouts term used in a while. So anyway, Green Lantern Annual, #1. Fantastic issue. Though I was a little bit, I'd have to say I liked it, but I didn't like it. If that makes perfect sense. I felt like it got away from. To me, it felt like it didn't tie in to what all's been written.
Yeah, it really didn't connect to the ongoing series. It was almost like, if you liken this to a TV series, which is what they kind of make an analogy to, this being a police procedural, this is almost like one of those one-off holiday episodes.
Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. Though the one part I did like about this issue was when they introduced the Green Lantern from the radio waves.
Oh, Airwave? Oh, the other,
the other guy, Kurt Zapp, I think his name was.
Yeah, when I was typing the review for this, my spell check was having a real hard time with this issue.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I thought that was an interesting take on a Green Lantern because he's the radio lantern of Quiz on the unseen spectrum, which to me felt kind of nuanced.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it's a playoff on things, and this world that we're talking about here did appear before. It goes back to the Flash in the 1990s. It was a planet, the frequencies of Quiz. And
okay, that's what it was. Okay,
yep.
So I didn't know where it was tying into, what universe it was tying into.
It's interesting because Morrison created it back in the 1990s when he did a couple of issues of the Flash.
Interesting. That's kind of funny how he brought it forward and put it in with Green Lantern, but it fit neatly into the story arc. It fits nicely into the Lantern mythos too.
Yeah, and it was really neat. Back in the Silver Age, the Jordan family were a lot more predominant in the books. They
Right.
were a larger part of the supporting cast, so it was really neat to see him use some of the characters that we knew about, but some of the characters that only appeared like once, like Uncle Titus. That was really kind of neat.
Then we haven't really seen a lot of Hal Jordan's family in a while. I couldn't even remember. I don't even remember the last time we see him in Venditti's run.
I think that was when they did the whole sonar thing, and there was the attack in Coast City and Hal's family was injured. His nephew got hurt.
Right. I gotcha. So, what'd you think of it? How'd you feel about it?
I think my perspective is probably a little different just because I was a big fan of those old Silver Age stories. So for me to see the nieces and nephews was kind of interesting for me, and seeing Airwave return, that was kind of cool. We haven't seen Airwave in a long, long time. So that was really kind of cool to see that thrown into the book. I agree though. It's kind of odd because it doesn't appear as part of the ongoing continuity. So it just feels like a one-off, which it is. It's just unusual to do an annual. Normally when we get annuals, they're either to kick off a big story or to end a big story. That seems to be the formula these days. So it was really weird to see a one and done tale like this, but it was interesting. There were a lot of things I liked about it. Like I said, in terms of seeing the family dynamics and how Hal uses the family dynamics, because there was a ongoing story back in the day where Susan Williams, who ends up marrying Jim Jordan, she fell in love with Jim Jordan because she thought that Jim was Green Lantern.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that actually helps out. It helps out with context because I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's really kind of cool because that was a whole Silver Age plot where she was in love with Jim, and he was not Green Lantern when she finds out it's not him. and it's interesting tied to it here. Well, you know, our sex life got ruined after you found out it wasn't me, kind of thing. Was humorous. It was neat to see Hal use his knowledge of his family in that way. To me, maybe the most fun part for me was seeing Helen Jordan, because Helen showed up in the Spectre run, and she was a predominant character for the second half of the Spectre series that J.M. DeMatteis wrote. And she kind of, the way that ended, there was no way for her to really be brought back into continuity. And so Morrison kind of does that. And what he does is there's that little wink and a nod to Hal's ghost. You know, she had a near-death experience, and she says, you know, I had this experience with, you know, this adventures with your ghost. And I thought it was cool that it was a neat way to almost like he took the Spectre run and made it canon again by making it what she experienced during her near-death experience.
Interesting. That's really cool.
So it's interesting, you know.
I like the playoff on Quiz and how it impacted the electronics. I thought that was kind of a neat. It kind of reminded me of who's that character from Shockwave? It's Shockwave, one of the characters from the Batman universe that was always on the Justice League cartoons. She used to go across on the airwaves or whatnot, and she used to run the electrical currents. Appeared in TV sets and stuff like that. Gosh, I can't remember her name, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of that too, because I wasn't familiar with a lot of these characters in this book. You know,
do you mean Livewire?
Livewire, that's who it was. Livewire, yeah. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah, in a way, you're right.
And the whole Quiz thing was kind of cool, because I remember posting a picture of that Green Lantern on Twitter, and a couple of people had responded to it. And he was just a cute character, you know. I was like, okay, where's this guy been? And is he going to be in the Green Lantern Corps? And can we see more of him in the future?
Yeah, he's kind of cool. You know, I think this issue, just kind of flipping through it now, I don't think Hal Jordan has been in civilian clothes for as long as he was in this one issue.
No, you're totally right. You're absolutely right. If not that, or medieval armor.
Yeah, right. So I enjoyed it as a one-off tale. It was cool to see them do the Doug Jordan thing, because again, he's a character that appeared like once back in the Silver Age. I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Morrison run, is that he takes those old elements, and for people that didn't read them, there's something new. But for people that did experience them and read them before, or even, you know, you may have read them and forgot about them,
Sure.
Just to see him make them relevant again is really cool.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and for somebody like you who knows more of the history than I will, but it brings it back for you. And then for me, it's like, okay, some stuff I'm familiar with, but a lot of stuff, like you had said, you either forget or you missed out on it, or glazed it over to begin with. And then you're like, sometimes when you make mentions of it, Myron, yourself, it's like that sometimes triggers at me. I'm like, okay, now I remember what he's talking about. Now I remember where the connection is at, from Morrison pulling that back from the past and bringing it forward.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I think a lot of writers take the easy way out, and it's easy to just create something new. And I think it takes something special to take some of these old, wacky Silver Age concepts that are there sometimes and bring it forward. You know, you think about, again, that Susan Williams thing. That's such an old trope that you saw all over the place in TV shows and comics and those kind of things. And to see him bring it forward and show how that trope kind of plays out in a modern setting is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you know, I enjoyed the artwork. It was a little bit different than seeing Sharp's work that we've been so used to over the course of time. So there was a lot of backgrounds in here that were blank, you know, and then a lot of the panels that stood out over the blank page in the background. I'm so used to having that all filled in, and having all those visuals that were appearing in the backgrounds with the pairs, with the like Hal Jordan and all them foreshadowing it. It kind of like took me a minute to adjust to it, because I mean you're so used to looking at Sharp's art, and then you got Morrison's writing on there, and you get this like visual impact on everything, and then you get an onslaught of this dense narrative with Grant Morrison. But this one here, to me, felt like when I was reading Morrison, I could actually pay more attention to his writing and not get so much distracted by the beautiful art that Sharp reflects in the regular issues.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. You know, you when you get an artist like Liam Sharp, or, you know, I felt the same way about Ethan Van Sciver in his heyday on the Green Lantern books, where he would put so much detail into the drawings that sometimes you got lost in the visuals and you almost didn't pay attention to some of the narrative stuff. And when you get to a book like this, where, like you said, there's a lot of sparseness to the backgrounds, you really focus more on the narrative, and B, you really realize what a good job that the regular artist does that you kind of start taking for granted after a while. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Nothing against him though. I mean, he did a really, really good job, and I like his take on Hal. I thought Hal looks cool. I liked it. I thought it was a good book, and like you said, a standalone, and it was an interesting story. I remember my friend Brian had read it, and he was asking me some questions about it. And I told him, I was like, there's a lot of the stuff that took place in that book that I'm not familiar with. And he kept asking, well, when are you guys recording again? When are you guys recording again? I was like, well, just wait, because Myron's got more of a background knowledge in what's happening in that book. So I guarantee you, when you listen to this episode, it'll make more sense.
I mean, I think, you know, in writing my review for this book, one of the questions I tried to ask myself was, is this worth $5? Because it's, you know, it's $1 more than a regular issue. Yeah, you're getting more pages, but does the story warrant it? And I'm not sure it does. I think a lot of it depends on how your background and history is with the character and how much interest you have in the Jordan family. I think if I'm a casual reader, I probably wouldn't spend the money on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You know, I don't know as if it's necessarily worth $5, to be very honest. If I look at it completely from taking my nostalgia factor for the Jordan family, I'm not sure I would find that to be of value. If I didn't know what I know, I would probably be going, why did we do an annual of this?
Well, not only that, like if I'm not a Lantern fan, you know, and let's say that, like my buddy, you know, you're just now starting to read Green Lantern with Grant Morrison and stuff like that, and you're just now starting to pick up on the character, and then you go and spend $5 on this, and then it doesn't relate to the storyline that's been going on, you kind of feel robbed a little bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised in a way that the annual wasn't saved for the finale of the first season.
But then again, you know, thinking about this issue moving forward, maybe some of the elements in this will pop up in later issues, or it could be year 2 when they start on their second run. Maybe some elements of this will pop up then. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. That I think that's the thing about Grant Morrison is you can't take anything for granted because you don't know what's gonna come back later on. I mean, and when we start talking about issue number 10, that's certainly the case. There are things in issue 10 that go back all the way to the beginning of this run.
Well, and he's not predictive, you know. I mean, there's some, I don't know. To me, there's some books that I read that you kind of get that predictive feeling to where you either know what may or may not be coming, or know what you might see. And every time I read a Morrison book, I don't get that feeling because with each issue you don't. That's like with issue 10 that came out this week. I mean, I didn't know what to expect because I didn't know what I was going to be seeing, and then I read it, and then I'm like, whoa. I did not expect that. I did not know that was going to happen. And he has that vibe about him when Morrison writes that you don't know where he's going to go with stuff.
It's refreshing because so often books have become predictable, especially if you've read comics for a long time, as a lot of us have. You start to see the signs of what's going to happen. And, you know, I'll use the analogy when my wife and I are watching certain TV shows like crime dramas and so on. They're so formulaic, and within like the first 10 minutes, I'm telling her who did it. And so many of us can do that kind of thing because you get used to what the tropes are, and they're very formulaic. And I think comics are the same way to some extent, that you get used to certain formulas, and so you know what's coming. And with Morrison, you almost have to check out and just enjoy the ride because you don't know really what angle he's going to take.
And I think he forces you to look backward, you know, like we have with the issues in the past and stuff, where you're like, where certain things pop up and you're like, okay, where'd that come from? And then you go back and you do your research into where it was last seen, not so much in your case because you have that vast knowledge of the stuff in the past. You know where it pulls from more often than not. But the casual readers are the people that are just now picking up on it. The ones that are really, really invest their time into these books will look into it and say, okay, I find it, maybe this person hasn't shown up before, but if they have, I'm going to research to see where they have before and see if there's other stuff done about it. Like Kurz Zap. Has he shown up before in the past as a Green Lantern? I don't think that he has.
Nope, he's new.
Yeah, so that makes you want to like think back and go, I wonder if he's shown up before, and then they go research it and check it out, and that's one of the nods I got to give to Morrison in his writing. I mean, he actually, he gives fans something to look into. And that's only if you're really, really a good Green Lantern fan. I mean, obviously the casual reader is just going to read it and go about their business or whatnot. But you and I, being Lantern fans and people that listen to this podcast, we put our time and effort into it, and we really, really are invested into Hal Jordan and invested into the Green Lantern Corps in its entirety. And those little nuggets that get placed, it really helps the storylines out, and it really helps the mythos out a lot too.
Yeah, I've got to say, when I do the reviews, when I did the review for this issue 10, I don't get copies in advance. A lot of sites will get review copies directly from DC Comics. They'll get them like on Sunday. So they'll have a few days to do research and so on to kind of prep themselves for a review. And I unfortunately don't have that luxury. DC does not give me the comics. I actually buy them twice. I buy them once in floppy format, and I buy them once digitally so I can do the screen grabs for graphics. So I was up last night writing this review until about 12:30 in the morning because this issue we're going to talk about next was much more taxing on my memory. There were elements I'm like, I know it from somewhere, but I couldn't tell you where it's from. And so I spent a lot of time Googling certain elements just because I needed to refresh my own memory. And some people don't like that. And I understand that, but some people don't like it because they just want to pick the book up and read it and enjoy it. And Morrison, what I'm finding is that, you can do that, but you get less of an experience than if you join him in the journey of exploring DC's past and looking these things up and finding out how they all fit together. Because when you step back and do that, you start seeing all these things he pulls together. It's like, wow, these were disparate elements of the DCU that were spread around and used in like one or two times, and he finds ways to make them work together. And it just shows kind of the creativity that's there. And it makes the DC universe feel like a living entity. And, I found myself more and more disconnected from the DC universe at large because I don't find that connectivity. I remember back before New 52 and after New 52 started, I was buying almost every book that DC printed because I felt so engaged with the universe. And these days, I'm buying the Green Lantern book and a couple of other issues here and there, but that's all I'm buying from DC. And so I really respect the fact that this is allowing me to engage in some fashion on a deeper level than just picking up a book and flipping through it in 10 minutes.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, you're right. Well said. I mean, it is that connective tissue that keeps you engaged in the material. And, I've always been a big fan of when other characters show up in other books and stuff like that, or the cross universes, where something's happening in one book, you can feel its impact in the other book. I've often enjoyed that, but this, like you said, with Morrison and the Green Lantern stuff, I mean, he's bringing that connective tissue from even more sparse elements of the DCU and making it more tangible, and I think with what I feel with what DC is trying to do is they are trying to tap into that nostalgia of older characters. It's like what I brought up about Tom King writing Adam Strange, and bringing back some of those older characters and bringing them forward for people to enjoy from stuff that hasn't been written about in quite a long time.
True. So, I think we've kind of exhausted the annual. So why don't we pause for just a minute? I know I need to wet my whistle. We'll come back and let's talk about Green Lantern number 10.
Oh, yeah. Looking forward to that one.
Well, Phil, when we look at Green Lantern number 10, this is part one of a 2-part build-up towards the finale. And boy, is there a lot of stuff in this issue. This one, I think, as I was saying a little bit ago, took me a little while to unpack because there's so much stuff going on and there's so many appearances of different characters. Right off the bat, you get this 1-page snapshot of what goes on. They kind of hit the rewind button and go back a little bit to before the Guardians of the Multiverse rescued Hal and Abin Sur from Earth 20. And we're seeing a snapshot of Earth 36 on this first page. And we're seeing the flashlight. And we get, other than just being an adventure and showing how flashlight gets pulled into the crisis, we get some information about how does Flashlight's weapon work. And we find out that there's a handful of power settings that you can choose from. And you get this really interesting layout. It's, very classic. And it seems to be very nostalgic in a way. I mean, even when it comes to the art of the alien, the custodians of the cosmos instead of the guardians of the universe, very much old school. And this is a world where a lot of the characters are gay. So you've got, in this particular universe, Hank Hallmark, the Flashlight of that universe, is in a romantic relationship with the Flash, their version of the Flash.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because it's not. I mean, even though that it is gay, it's not thrown in your face that way.
No,
not
at all.
It's not intentional. It's not forced. And I feel like a lot of writers and a lot of agendas are put behind some comic books to where that has to be something that needs to be focused on. But this one doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And when you look at Earth 36, it's very, it reminds me of the 50s. It's very retro looking.
Right.
And then you flip the page, if Earth 36 is the 50s, welcome to the 60s when you get to Earth 47, because that's far out, man.
It really is, man. It's like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I love the one guy that looks like a blue meanie from the Yellow Submarine.
He does. And it kind of reminds me of some of the characters that appeared, and I don't know if some of our listeners might be familiar with Samurai Jack. Some of these characters were kind of familiarized in that kind of artwork that was done in that series, like that cartoon series.
It's really cool. And when you look at the page layout, everything kind of oozes between themselves. There's no panel delineation at all. It's when I was writing my review, it reminded me of a comic book tie-dye T-shirt because everything was just melded together. Even the color choices are different. It's all very psychedelic looking. Even the lettering, the groovy and so on is done in such a way that it oozes hippie 60s counterculture.
I told a friend of mine when I was talking to him about this issue because he asked how it was before he read it, and I said, "Well, I was like, when you read it, I go, imagine yourself looking at a lava lamp and trying to read a comic book in that way." He's like, "Man, I don't know if I can do that." I'm like, "It's tough, but it's doable." And let me tell you something, Liam Sharp made it happen in this issue.
Yeah, I mean, these one-pagers, if you're not familiar with these characters, and I know I'm not really all that familiar with them, it gave me just enough information that's like, okay, I understand where this character's coming from. I understand where this character's coming from. When we go to Earth 32, we see Bat Lantern, which is based on the Mike W. Barr Batman in Darkest Night graphic novel from the 1990s. You see this being the amalgam of Batman and Green Lantern. And what's he fighting? Well, he's fighting an amalgam of the Shark and the Penguin, who's in a turf war with an amalgam of Black Hand and Black Mask.
and then you got Penny 2 there.
Well, and it's interesting because in the book, Alfred died. And so the Construct has replaced Alfred. Bruce's.
Oh yeah. That's really, really cool. That's right. That's interesting. I would not have known that.
And then when you get to the next page and you see this cybernetic guy, and this is the Hal Jordan we saw, the Anti-Matter Lantern we saw in the very first issue.
Yeah, that's cool that he brought that back into this. You know what I mean? Ties it in.
I mean, he's obviously been changed in some way. But you see how they get rescued and just the interactions between Magic Lantern and Bat Lantern where, Bat Lantern's like, well, I don't approve of weed. And then Magic Lantern's like, well, don't bum me out when I'm doing the work of the good guru,
Oh man, if there's one beef I have about this issue, it's just, I mean, it seems like everywhere you look, Batman's showing up in something, and I get it, and I'm gonna give it its credit here because it's Green Lantern, and I love Green Lantern, and I'm okay with it. But oh, man, I'm just wish he wouldn't pop up in everything.
I get it. I love the interactions between the two, though. So for me, that made it worthwhile. I know, Arkillo and Guy Gardner were such a great fan loved pairing, but boy, I would love a book with these two characters together.
Oh, it would be totally amazing, and it's neat to see how this Batman from that Earth acts significantly different than Batman of Earth 1. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And then they escape and we get a little bit of a flash forward, and then we see the arrival of the sentient planet. And there was long been a lot of conjecture that character appeared 20 years before we saw Mogo. It appeared in Green Lantern number 24 from 1963, and the planet never had a name. But it had this, this continent shape of Hal. Long story behind that. I'm not going to reiterate what happened in that issue, but back then, Hal helped the planet out and made a promise that he'd visit again. Well, here we are some, 50 some odd years later, and they're getting their reunion, and we finally get a name. The name of the planet is Ugo.
Ugo. kind of close to Mogo.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if they're cousins.
I wonder if planets can have. Well, they can have cousins, I guess. I don't see why not.
Yeah, who knows? So it was neat to see that character come back, because back in the day when Mogo first showed up, they wondered if Mogo was that planet because we never saw that planet again after that issue. And so Morrison kind of answers that mystery.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's a tidbit of Green Lantern lore I never knew. Yeah,
it's cool. And then, it acts as the headquarters for the Guardians of the Multiverse. And we see the group expand a little bit, and you see Cairo, who's based on the Batman Beyond cartoon that Justice League. They made him from Earth 12. That's the Earth that universe lives in. And you see the Tangent Green Lantern, and you see Stan Lee's creation of Len Lewis being from Earth 6 from the Stan Lee. He reimagines different characters of the DCU, and then there's a version of John Stewart from Earth 23.
So. That medallion, that's the Abin Sur one, right? I forgot his name right now. When they're standing there at that council table.
Oh, and he's talking about the medallion, the Mind Rider?
Yeah, that's a Dark Star emblem on that medallion.
Yes. Yeah. And what it reminded me of was, if you go back to the first issue, there's a traitor in the Green Lantern Corps. So did that individual who's the traitor plant this on Abin Sur? Is that individual behind what's going on here? I don't know. Could be.
Yeah, it could be.
But, after all of that, they kind of go on a mission. And there's some really neat little things that happen. There was a neat dig where they're talking about all the different Earths. And the John Stewart's character goes, well, nobody could agree on who was Earth 1, because originally our Earth was Earth 1, but then DC launched those Earth 1 books. So our Earth became Earth 0.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Huh.
So I thought it was kind of funny that they did that. And that cube shape, the, what is it? What is it called again? Oh, gosh. The transmitter cube. That's from past history, too. That's nothing new.
Now, what's that from, if I might ask?
That came in the 1970s. That was how, back in the day, the Justice League and the Justice Society would visit each other. Back in the old days, they would have crossovers once a year, where the Justice League would either go to Earth 2 or the Justice Society would go to Earth 1. And the transmitter cube was how they got back and forth.
So it wasn't a boom tube back then?
Yeah. No, it was called the transmitter cube. And there was only allowed to be one in each universe.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of things that, again, pull from the rich history. A lot of it ties into the multiversity. A lot of these characters were in multiversity. The Orrery of Worlds certainly was part of it. The seven locked worlds, that's all part of that story. So it kind of all goes together. It makes me want to go back and reread Multiversity.
Yeah, I haven't revisited that in quite some time, and I liked it when they released it, when Morrison wrote that. I was really, really big into it. It was kind of cool seeing like what's his face, the rabbit, Captain Carrot or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I always thought that it was an interesting, and I like reading about the different universes, the different worlds. It's like the different. They didn't have a lot of emphasis on the different cores from different universes, but they did have an emphasis on the different teams from the different universes, and everyone varied from what Earth you were from. And I thought that was kind of interesting, a different take on it. Like the one Earth was all vampires, and then one of them was when the Nazis won World War II, and the whole world was filled with all these really, really bad guys and stuff. And I really, really like how they tap into those different multiverses. I mean, Morrison did a good job with those too.
Oh yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's a little mind stretching, but it's a good in a good way. I did like the levity of when he kind of jumps out of dealing with the Guardians of the Multiverse and he comes back to our Earth, and you see the Green Lanterns trying to clean up the mess of the attack where the Superwatch got damaged. All these guys got hurt, and Halkar is there, and the Green Lanterns are kind of treating him like he's a pedestrian that's in the way of their investigation.
They kind of are.
It was humorous, but I don't think that was a throwaway scene either, because you see Chazalon in the next page kind of pumping Volk for information about Hal. And again, in my mind, it's planting that seed. Is Chrysalon, not Chazalon, Chrysalon, is he the traitor? Because again, his rescue by Hal in the beginning is what kicked off this whole plot.
It's kind of funny because I wonder how many times spell check you'd have to do on Volk.
Yeah. And,
I mean, you have to read his captions like at least 2 or 3 times to even understand what that guy's saying.
Oh, I know. Oh, my word. But that large creature that attacked the Superwatch must be the big, big bad that's coming. And it gave me the feeling that something big is coming, that Morrison is using this title to do something big for the entire DCU with almost another crisis without making this big, huge event. It's interesting, but then we flash back and they're looking. It was interesting. They're looking for the Cosmic Grail, which is on Earth 15. Earth 15 was the world that Voltham is from, and they're looking for the Cosmic Grail. But there's also a Star Sapphire there, and Hal is like, he's not so worried about the gloom and doom. He's like, well, tell me about Star Sapphire.
Yeah, he jumped all over that too.
Oh yeah, and then this guy at the end. Boy, he's kind of cool looking. I noticed immediately obviously the Green Lantern symbols. They drew attention to that in that last panel. The Green Lantern symbols that he has as irises. And I know I had seen it before and I couldn't remember. And so it's funny because I was getting things ready for Terrificon, and I have, the blank cover of the Green Lantern issue number 1. And I thought, let me pull that issue up, because there was in the back of that book. Remember, there was the previews of things to come, and there's the eye with that symbol in it next to a broken lantern in one image. And I get the impression from what he's going to tell, the tale, is that he's going to talk about the origin, the true origins of the Green Lantern power, because Morrison has said that this book is called The Green Lantern not because of the title character, but because it's about the lantern.
Interesting, man. That's really, really cool. So this was a retcon going back to the first issue. This guy at the end of this issue, does he look familiar to you from any past Green Lantern books, or?
Not really. It's interesting. His facial hair is interesting. I thought it was also very interesting that he looks like he almost has a naturally occurring domino mask, which I thought was kind of cool. But I don't recognize him from anything. Now, could he be a new character or could he be a retooled one? I don't know which it is. Either way, boy, I'm intrigued by it.
But if you do zoom in on his face, his mask looks like Hal Jordan's mask a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, could he be a Hal from another universe? Could be. That wouldn't be a shock. It'd be a surprise, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
I'm at the point where nothing Morrison does is going to shock me.
No, you're right, and especially with what you extrapolated from this issue, with everything that he's pulled from, and then of course the tidbits that he gets from the multiverse too, as well. But I like the interplay of the multiverse with just the Green Lantern aspect to it. You know what I mean? Because to me, it makes it a bigger dimension, than just being constrained to the multiverse and the different characters from the multiverse, of course. But then you got the Green Lantern Corps, and this focuses on them alone.
Yeah, and there was some interesting news that came out. There's not going to be a Green Lantern book in October. So apparently after this season ends in September, the book is skipping a month. And then they made a comment about in the solicitation for the finale of this season that when the book returns, it won't be called the Green Lantern anymore.
Did they allude what it was going to be called, or did they?
No, of course they did. They teased that big time. They didn't say. So will this become a Guardians of the Multiverse book?
Or Green Lantern, the Green Lantern Corps of the Multiverse?
Well, it says it won't have Green Lantern in the title.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, obviously it's a marketing hype, but
Lanterns of the Multiverse.
It could be. You never know. I don't know. I really love this issue. When I read it through the first time, I did, as a lot of people probably did, a lot of head scratching. I recognized certain things, didn't recognize others. I spent some time going back and doing some research and so on. I'm like, oh, this all makes sense now, and this is really cool. And I think that's where people that are not enjoying this run, they don't want to go through that exercise. And I totally get that. Sometimes I just want to pick a book up and read through it and read an adventure. And that isn't this.
And this book was fresh too. I mean, it was totally unlike the others that we've read through all 9 issues or whatnot. And like you did, I went into this and it was a fun read, number one. And not only that, it was just so rich. I enjoyed it. Probably my favorite issue so far, but that's only because they pulled in so much from different multiverse, or the different multiverse. And I've always been a big fan of this whole multiverse concept. I've always liked the different Earths and stuff, and where different characters have different personalities from those Earths, especially when you're so used to a singular dimension character, like Bruce Wayne, Batman of Earth 1. You get so used to that that common type of character that it's nice to see reflectively how their persona is perceived in a different kind of Earth, under different circumstances.
Oh yeah. And I think this issue probably had the best synergy between Morrison's creative vision and the art team. I just think the art team did such a wonderful job. And in particular, I know Liam Sharp mentioned on Twitter, he talked about the bleed space and how he used special software to create a 3D Mandelbrot to use to represent the space in between the universes. I'm like, these guys are really all going all out to make this something really special.
Oh, and like when you flip through the pages, I mean, there's only one page that has the white background, and that's when they show that trans-dimensional cube you're talking about. Right. Outside of that, I mean, every page is filled in from corner to corner, every single one of them, and it's all rich in content. Yeah, it's not throwaway stuff at all. Yeah. And you don't see, sometimes you'll see books where artists will reuse certain images, they'll resample their own work. You're totally right. They'll do things where they'll have a panel and then the scene will shift a little bit, but the art doesn't really change, just the word balloons do, kind of thing. They might tweak a facial expression or whatever. You don't really see that. I mean, I suppose you could say there's one or two panels that you could see that when they first show up on Ugo. There's a couple panels at the bottom where it looks just slightly different, but by and large, everything is unique and different. And I struggled to go back and forth between using the term lavish and lush when I describe Liam Sharp's artwork. Yeah, that's good too. That's really, really two good descriptors for this. I mean, I don't know. It's his stuff is just so rich. I mean, I can't express it enough. And like, if I was to ever meet him in person, for somebody to have that kind of scope and understanding of the depth of artwork as much as he does, you know, and not a lot of artists have that talent, and that's no knock to other artists because everybody has their own style. But I mean, just him, Sharp himself. I mean, just I don't know, to be in his brain and to see what he sees when he's talking to Morrison. I can only imagine how that goes. You know, I can only imagine what those two are like when they're together talking about. Okay, well, this is what I want for this page, you know, and this is what I'm envisioning for this page, and this. To seeing those two work together, it's like watching magic. The guru would approve.
Very much so. So another awesome issue. So let's stop here, and we've got one more book to talk about. We got to discuss Sinestro.
Love it.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
All right, Myron, welcome back. Let's pivot a little bit away from the Green Lantern books and let's tap into some of the book that has to do with his arch nemesis, the almighty Sinestro. And we haven't seen a lot of Sinestro around, other than I don't know if anybody reads Justice League or not. He's popped up in there time and time again, but we haven't seen him in any of Morrison's run, and we get to see him over here in Year of the Villain. And let me tell you, it's nice to see him again. I've missed him, but it's nice to see Mark Russell. And I commented to him on Twitter this afternoon after I read it. That he really, really taps into Sinestro's psyche in this. And Russell did a good job by portraying Sinestro, how Sinestro should be portrayed. So I could tell by a lot of his narrative in here that he really, really looked into Sinestro's character from past books.
Yeah, I thought the thought boxes that let you get in his head showed a really good understanding of the character.
Yeah, it really did, and he really, really captured the essence of him, especially when because you get the gist of when him and Lex Luthor were together. Because Lex Luthor is the big baddie. For those not familiar, he's over in the Justice League, and they're doing this Year of the Villain thing and this Legion of Doom, and Lex Luthor's leading this whole charge for something big to come that's happening over in the League books, and you get the sense with Lex Luthor that everybody should back down from him. And while he might be leading this charge for whatever they're alluding to that's big to come, Sinestro in this issue doesn't back down from him, even when Lex tries to impose upon him. I don't know if you picked up on that or not when you were reading some of their banter back and forth.
Yeah, he didn't back down. It took me a minute to realize that was Lex because I haven't been following this story.
Yeah, I'm not really sure entirely what's happened to him. I know he's modified by Brainiac, or it has something to do with Brainiac or whatnot. But it was nice to see Sinestro take his own in this, and he leads his charge to put a stop to these things called the Paragons, which they're supposed to be. There's these big God creations that are coming for Earth, and it's going to mess up Lex's plan apparently for whatever he has planned for the planet Earth or whatnot. So Sinestro was put in charge of putting a stop to these Paragons, and it's nice to see Sinestro shine in his own issue. It kind of reflects back to when he had his own ongoing title, you know, and you've seen a lot of Sinestro around, and you got to get into his character. And like you said, when you had the word boxes in here, and you know, and you had Sinestro's narrative and what he's going through and what he's thinking and how he plays out the whole science behind these Paragons, and how these Paragons are these little creatures that are internal, and their lot in life is basically to regenerate these godlike beings or whatnot. And it was nice to see Sinestro come up with a plan just to stop these guys from regenerating these gods that were getting in the way of Lex Luthor's ultimate plan that he has for Earth 1. I guess I can say just Earth 1. So, but the one thing that confused me is that he talks about how Sinestro has mastered the ultraviolet light, and I didn't know if I didn't know that he had control of the indigo rings, because you notice he didn't use fear in this. A lot of it was reflective in compassion through this whole story arc, because he actually came up with a sequence of events to stop these Paragons from doing what they were doing, but it was a more mischievous plan that he had altogether.
Well, if I understand it correctly, and I haven't been reading Justice League, this isn't really an indigo ring. It's the ultraviolet ring. And apparently the ultraviolet ring does something different. And actually, if you look, it's not so much a ring as it is a tattoo. And apparently Jon Stewart has the same kind of a thing going on where he was doing the ultraviolet stuff for a while. But it basically what Scott Snyder was doing with this was showing that Sinestro's original mission, the reason why he always had that outfit that he had and what he was originally trying to do was to get to the ultraviolet light and learn to master it. And that even though there's all these colors that we see, there are colors beyond our ability to see that still have power, and ultraviolet being one of them. And so Sinestro now is the master of the ultraviolet power, which we haven't seen a whole lot of what you can do with it. You see some of it here. I thought it was interesting that he created those little versions of himself and actually carried on conversations with them. That was really interesting. I think one of the things I liked is that Sinestro's greatest strength isn't really in his ability to use all these different kinds of rings, but it's in his ability to plan and manipulate and direct things to be the way he wants them. And you see how, you see how he manipulates these creatures that are simple and naive, and he earns their trust, and then he uses their trust to get them to do what he wants to serve his master plan.
Right, and he wins in the end. He gets what he wants in the end, and that's how he's always. And to me, that's how he's always ended up. That's how he always was in the Green Lantern books. You know, even with Hal Jordan when they went back and forth, it was his own agenda. And he would do whatever he would do whatever it took to get his own agenda achieved.
Yeah, I admit I was a little worried after the Sinestro book ended that they were going to revert Sinestro back to being the standard one-dimensional mustache twirler that he used to be. And this really made me happy to see that, no, this is continuing. They see the value of the character as he's been recreated by Jeff Johns. Let's keep him that way. So I was really glad to see that. The other thing I thought was neat is, good science fiction can talk about issues, not necessarily by beating you over the head with conversation or perspective, but by creating stories that make you think. And I think if you were to look at the story, the characters that are here, the little beings that do nothing more, their entire life is to serve their master. There's social commentary embedded in there if you so choose to look for it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Now that you mention it, you're right. I didn't really pick up on that before, but you're absolutely right. Especially in the spot where they gain their ultimate freedom to have the free will to do whatever they wanted to do instead of just being beholden to their master.
Well, and I thought it was interesting too how Sinestro at first gets them to abandon this hard work ethic to take up a life of leisure. And then he spins it right back around again. And it shows how easily it is to manipulate people.
Especially these people, these poor souls that were just basically worker bees.
Right.
Their whole entire life. And they only had a lifespan of 0.2 milliseconds.
Yeah, right.
And in the end of this, he only gained their lifespan by 2 more milliseconds.
Yeah.
But yet to them, it was more life that they could enjoy. It's something of which they never had before.
Well, and then he uses that to be able to get control of one of the godlike creatures and turn him to using Sinestro as his master.
Yeah, which is cool because at the end page, you see Lex talking about it. Will be interesting to see which he chooses. And what he's referring to is which master that this godlike creature is going to be controlled by, Sinestro or Lex himself, depending on what his agenda is in the League books.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit where Sinestro says, he has no choice but to serve me for the rest of his life. And Lex says, yes, the rest of his life or the rest of yours. It'll be interesting to see which one he chooses.
Exactly. But I really thought Mark Russell did a good job. giving us a Sinestro that we deserve. It's the only sad part about it that I like is it's not in any way related to the Green Lantern books, but one can hope down the line that sooner or later Sinestro will end up appearing in those books. You never can tell when, but it's nice to see Sinestro shine in other universes and in other story arcs, which makes sense for this book because it's Legion of Doom, and it's nice to see him part of a group of villains like Gorilla Grodd and Brainiac and all them that are leading this charge for this year of the villains, which kind of funny because they already did a villain story arc, a couple years back. You remember when they had all those villain titles that came out with?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to see Sinestro in this kind of light. I don't know if they're doing more with him or not, but it'll be interesting to see if he shows up in the other League books or if he has more commentary. Yeah,
I think, just as we were talking about, it was interesting to see Hal interact with his peers from other universes. I think it's good for Sinestro. For so long, he's been associated with the Green Lantern, and you almost sometimes need to see these characters in a different light to appreciate them and see them grow in different ways because it is a different environment.
Yeah, kind of like how Zod was with Venditti's run coming over to Green Lantern. And everybody's so familiar with Zod being part of the Superman base.
Yeah. It's a great example.
Yeah. But all in all, I think the biggest thing I liked about this issue was the power play between Lex and Sinestro. Everybody knows Lex is powerful, and everybody knows that Sinestro is powerful. But you didn't get a sense when you left this issue that neither of them trumped the other. But you did get a sense that Sinestro outsmarted Lex, which is in and of itself something to be noteworthy about.
Yeah. I think the only thing that caught me off guard is because I haven't been following the story, there was nothing telling me that was Lex. And it took me a while till I got partway through the book. And I'm like, oh, that's Lex Luthor.
Yeah, I think I was reading one of the League books, and I think he was having a conversation with Martian Manhunter. And Martian Manhunter was trying to help Lex at one time because of what he became or something like that. And, of course, Lex being Lex, he became what he became because that's what he wanted to become. And he wasn't going to accept the help of anybody because, I don't know, ultimately, I don't get the sense of knowing where they're going with the League books. But I've kind of gotten weary of the Justice League lately, mainly because I don't identify with a lot of their characters like I used to anymore. I'm tired of Batman. I miss Green Lantern being a part of the Justice League. Wonder Woman's kind of an ineffectual character, and at least it feels like it. So I'm just kind of reading it because I'm used to reading it. And I know that's not fair, but the storyline is too convoluted, and this is the Green Lantern podcast, so I'm not even going to go into it, but it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. And actually, it's going to be interesting to see where this ties in. Agreed.
So it was a fun book. It was nice to have two books, Green Lantern books in 1 week for a change.
It was. And for the fans listening, this was my choice, just mainly because, a lot of people don't read Justice League. So a lot of people are unfamiliar with what's happening with Sinestro these days. And, I hope this maybe shed some light on what he's doing in other universes. And that way we can fill you in on other details from other characters.
Absolutely. So with that, let's wrap this up, and we'll come back in a couple minutes.
Okay.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening, otherwise I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
Well, Phil, that wraps up episode number 145. We had a lot of good conversation tonight. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, we did, and it was three good books. I'd have to say the standout was GL10. It's still an ongoing favorite of mine. Annual was good, and I liked seeing what Sinestro was up to. But it was good to talk about multiple books for a change instead of just talking about one and getting more information out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. It's something I do miss. I miss when, back in the days when we had 4 books in 1 month and you had so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But, with what Morrison gives you, it's almost like reading 2 books.
Yeah, it really is. You're totally right.
But so we should be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure what we'll do. Maybe we'll do a retro review episode. Or maybe I'll just take the interviews. If I get enough of them, I might make just an all interview episode. I don't know. We'll see.
That'd be cool. Yeah, just let me know what we want, and we'll get back on the air soon.
Absolutely. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. As always, thanks for listening to the show, everybody. We do appreciate you folks taking the time out of your day to listen to what Phil and I have to talk about, and we hope that what we say enhances your fan experience. So till next time, as always, keep that power ring charged, treat each other well, and make every day your brightest day.
Well, so we'll talk to you guys soon.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.